Have you ever went to a match and you struggle with your timing and rhythm? I mean, you go out there and it just feels like everything's all over the place. You're either too late, too early, and to make matters worse, you're playing some person over there who's hacking the ball this way, or they're just lobbing, or they're just taking the ball. It's just a mess. So in this video, I'm going to help you with your timing and rhythm and show you what the factors are and how you can make adjustments to no matter what or who you play or what the conditions are, you can figure out how to have the best timing and rhythm. So let's get started. So the very first things you need to understand is you need to understand the factors that influence our timing and rhythm. And we're going to break up timing and rhythm into two different things. Timing, I consider, is the time you need to do your stroke. Rhythm is the feeling of it, the rhythmical feeling. Sometimes players are able to get the racket back and get to contact, but it feels so janky. We don't want the janky strokes. We want it to feel smooth and in control and well-timed, just like you see the pros. They get the racket back and they time it regardless of who they're playing. So let's get to those factors. 4 important factors. Number 1 is power. How much power does the ball have on it? And power, I think of when you hit the ball harder, it gets to you sooner, making or disrupting your time. And this is what the pros do. When they're rallying back and forth, they usually are hanging around the same timing and they pick a ball to accelerate on that ball to change the timing, making sure that when they change that timing, their opponent is either too far ahead or too far behind, or to get the ball back, they have to slow down and be more careful, causing it to be a weaker ball that they can then attack. And that's how they use timing. Another form of power or taking time away is similar, is taking the ball on the rise, because basically instead of swinging faster to get the ball to go faster, you're taking more time away from your opponent to make the ball get to them quicker, causing the exact same thing. The second one is spin. And you see this by who? Nadal. Rafael Nadal hits so much spin on the ball. And when his spin hits, it jumps off the court. So this, again, disrupts your timing. It makes it harder to time to get the ball in the right location. And so this is why he's so successful on all surfaces, because he uses his spin to disrupt and keep players pinned behind the baseline. The next one will be your position on the court. If you're close to the baseline or you're moving forward because you're an approach, well, guess what? You're taking time away from yourself, which means you have to prepare earlier, that we'll talk about in a second. Or if you move back, you're giving yourself more time. So you can see how the positioning plays a part. And finally, is going to be your swing. If you have a very big swing, if you look at like players like Del Potro, who have this really big swing compared to a player like Federer, who has a much more smaller, compact swing, then it also plays a factor in your swing. Meaning that if you have a bigger swing, it's going to take you maybe a little bit longer. So generally, you see players with bigger swings hang a little bit further back to give themselves a little bit more timing. And you see players that have shorter swings tend to be able to play a little bit closer to the baseline if they want to. Now that you understand these factors, we're going to go back through and talk about knowing something about each one of the factors. And you can probably pick this out. This is the first stage of learning how to have good timing and rhythm. What I mean by knowing something about the ball is that most of the time when we go to the ball, or I see players out there in the hitting, they don't know anything about the ball. And this is the telltale sign where I know you don't know anything about the ball. Meaning that if you see a player and they hit a ball like this, I see this with like the pros and they're playing with like a recreational player and they sideswipe the ball. Well, what do you know about the ball? Well, I know that that ball, when it bounces, it's gonna jet sideways just because of the way they swing. But I see the recreational player run up straight to where the bounce should be and how it should bounce, and they line up and get ready, and then suddenly the ball's moving, they're like, oh! That tells me you didn't know anything about the ball. And that tells me that your timing and rhythm is going to be really hard to find if you don't know anything about the ball. So we go back through those things. When we think about speed and when your opponent's taking the ball early, knowing something about the ball is that the ball is going to come through the court faster. It's going to skip through the court. Now, the other factor that might change this is depending on your surface you're playing on. If I hit the ball flatter or take the ball earlier, a lot of times, like you might see on clay, is that the clay will slow the ball down and take that advantage away. And that's hence why you see points being a lot longer on a clay court surface versus a hard court surface. Now, you go to spin, what do we know about the ball? Spins exaggerate whatever effect that they're putting on the ball. Hence, if you're hitting topspin, it exaggerates the bounce. So you don't want to be as close to the bounce. Maybe give yourself a little bit more room away, or if you're going to take it early, realize that you have a smaller window to do it. Slice, which is another spin, exaggerates. It's going to skid, kind of do the opposite where topspin bounces off. Slice tends to skid or make the ball hold up. And if you're hitting a penetrating slice, it's going to skid through the court compared to a soft slice with a lot of backspin where it's just going to stop. I see this, another one where a pro would do this to a recreational player. They run up thinking they're going to get a short ball and it bounces and they're like, oh, because they didn't know something about the ball. And so once you know something about the ball, it allows you to get to this second part, which is tracking. If you want to have good timing or rhythm, you have to have good tracking of the ball. What I mean by tracking is knowing where the ball is going to be. And the way we do this is we use our non-dominant hand, meaning my left hand is going to track the ball, meaning that by having my hand here, this is where I want to make my ideal contact. So when I'm swinging, boom, that's where I want to make contact, right there. So like we were talking about before, if someone does this to you and you know something about the ball, and I'll do it this way, if the ball, and they're swinging like this, just a reminder, you're swinging like this, so the ball's gonna bounce and go this way, what do I wanna do? The key is this. I would actually probably line up with the bounce being right here in anticipation of when it bounces, it's gonna come over here. So bingo, so when it bounces, I make a small adjustment because I'm already made a big adjustment, so when it bounces over here, I'm ready to hit it. Where a recreational player do, if they don't know anything about the ball and they don't know tracking, they'll line up right here. So let's say the ball's gonna bounce right here and they're ready to go. Then it bounces and then they're like, oh, and then it completely disrupts your timing. Where a player that knows that's gonna happen, they're prepared, meaning that they haven't started their swing yet because they know the ball's gonna do something weird. And that's leading us to our final stage, is your swing. Your swing is a big component about having good rhythm and timing. And there's different ways of doing it. There's 3 different stages, one being the unit turn, using your shoulders to take the racket back, 2 being the release of how we take the racket back, and then 3 being the start of the swing. Now, what's most important, which is, I would say, phase number 3, because in phase number 3, I've front-loaded my swing, so let me explain. So many players, I see this when they're waiting for the ball. They wait right here, the ball bounces, and with the ball bouncing, they take the racket back. And so now, think about that. The ball's coming up, I still have to take my racket back. The ball's having this weird effect, and then, I'm too close. Compared to if I front load my swing, doing more work in the beginning before the ball bounces, then guess what? As it bounces and comes up, I just have to focus on going down and through the ball if I'm gonna hit a little topspin. Maybe I won't even go down, but I'm ready to go forward, and that's key. You have to be ready to go forward. So the very first thing I want you to practice to get good timing is practice getting your racket back to position 2. So in this drill, we're gonna practice getting to position 2. And so we're talking about 1, 2. This is the end of the release. The reason why this is important is because you can notice from right here, if I just start my swing and I wait for the bounce, boom, it's very nice, very easy. And so I want you to practice this. Just drop a ball and start the racket here. Now what we want to avoid is if we're starting, let's say after the unit turn here, look how I have to take it back. So the timing rhythm is a little different. Now, is there a time for just kind of getting to the unit turn and basically having a very short position 2 and then going forward? Yes, it's called the return to serve. We're not gonna talk about that in this video. But in a normal ground stroke, we wanna get to a position where our racket's ready to go down and forward by the time or right before the ball bounces. And you'll see this so many times when the players are playing. You see a Djokovic or a Nadal, you see all these players and they're moving to the ball and they time that by the time or slightly before the ball bounces, they're in this position. And the rhythm of it, we talked about the timing of making sure we have time to get to the contact. Generally, the rhythm for a lot of players is consistent or constant movement. So as I go from my unit turn here and I release, there's a slowing down. So as ball's coming, and I like this cadence, if you can use it with a ball machine, of saying ball, bounce, hit. Meaning that when the ball's being struck by my opponent, I'm ball, turning my shoulders, releasing, bounce, look where I am, bounce starts to come up, I can drop and hit. And this tends to feel, I think, the best. And you'll see it with a lot of players. Some players, what they'll do is maybe they'll take their racket back in a little bit stiffer manner, where they'll go like this, but they'll take it back very close to this position, so all they have to do is go like this. I think the advantage of having the slow movement is because you're building momentum, you're building speed, instead of having to start, stop, start again, okay? And so we don't want to have to start, stop, and start again. And I see sometimes players have the right idea because they're thinking about the preparation and they get to this part here, right here. So they're right here. But the problem is they haven't done the release phase really, or they're just holding it right here and they're holding it too long. And so the ball bounces and they still have the release phase and then they're late, okay? Now, what I mean by late is they're hitting the ball back here, because you might go, well, that's just like Nadal doing like his buggy whip. But what you'll see is Nadal gets it back here and he's still swinging and extending and then doing the buggy whip. So it's not a project of him being necessarily super late, where I see a lot of recreational players, they're hitting balls here. And so this is really important to understand, that the key is making sure that we get the racket where it just needs to go down and forward by the time the ball bounces, or slightly before. And if you can get that down, then you have both the right timing getting to the ball and a nice consistent feel. Because what we want is when we see the pros playing, what do we see? We see great timing and rhythm, meaning that when they're hitting the ball, you don't generally see that there's like herky-jerky or like here and then here. You see them all timing it really correctly because they have the racket in the right spot by the time the ball bounces. Now we're gonna use the ball machine and then you can practice this. Remember, going from unit turn, release, and then hit. So the very first thing I want you to do with the ball machine is start in this position. So you can see how even there, by just starting this position, my racket just goes down and forward. Start in this position, ball bounce, down and forward. So I can pretty much deal with any ball down and forward. Now, to combine this with my unit turn, boom. And so what happens by keeping my racket moving, I have a little bit more momentum to add more pace to the ball. Here, here. And so you're probably saying like, Kevin, these are really easy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually scoot up inside the court and take these balls earlier. Watch the timing though. Okay, getting there. So you can see how I'm really focusing on my getting the racket back much earlier so I can have the right timing. I sped that one up. I make sure that my racket's ready to go down and back by the time the ball bounces, and that makes me have better timing. And this is the key to timing and rhythm. The timing of making sure I have plenty of time to get the ball here. Now, are there gonna be some situations when your opponent hits the ball super hard and you're not gonna have a lot of time? Yes, but what you'll see with the pros is they take a swing where their release is much shorter and a little bit lower, so they cut down on how much they need to go down and then to the ball. So you'll see something like this, or you see a pickup like this, because they know the timing is now reduced because the ball's either deep or they're half volleying it. And what you'll then see is that a lot of times the racket's actually going down with the ball, so when it bounces, they just have a much shorter swing to the contact. And this will add to the most rhythm to your game. Now, there's one more thing. We talked about it, but I want to go a little bit deeper because this will take your game to the next level, which is tracking the ball. And what I mean by tracking the ball is learning how to use your left hand and your feet to get out to the ball. If you can do this, this is a huge winner because most players take lessons or they hit on the ball machine and like, oh, this is awesome. I get balls all day, and they go in the match, it's like, what happened? Well, I practiced on the ball machine and it was working, but I hit with my player and it's not working because your opponent's doing what? They're trying their best not to give you that same ball. They're giving you balls there, there, there. And the problem is we're not tracking the ball. But when you know how to track the ball, guess what? It doesn't matter what type of ball they give you. You know where you need to be and how to move your feet to get there. And with that knowledge, every ball becomes almost the same. Not every ball, but I would say probably like 80 or 85% of the balls become the same because of your footwork. And the way you get to that point is by watching this video.